Hi, everyone, and welcome to this special series of interviews with health practitioners serving people in the performing arts. I'm delighted to have with me today Danica Hendry. Hi, Danica, welcome.
Hi, Mark. How are you going?
Good. Danica is a physiotherapist, but I'm going to start with speaking with her. First question is, what first sparked your interest in performing arts medicine?
So I actually came from a background of being a professional dancer. And for me, it was almost a natural progression in my career to become a physiotherapist because I spent a lot of my time throughout my training and as a professional dancer on a physio's table and working with a physiotherapist. So that kind of sparked my initial interest. Growing up, I had a real interest in the body and how it worked and how it moved as well. So that fed that interest as well in performing artists, healthcare, particularly in relation to physio. So yeah, probably the biggest thing was when I was dancing, I'd get really frustrated when physios would say to me, you just have to stop. You're doing too much. That's the reason you're having problems. And as an artist, I was getting really frustrated with that. So I wanted to change the narrative around that and try to give dancers and other performing artists a greater sense of control over their pathway with an injury.
And that's, I gather, is really important. It was for you important personally, and you've seen it play out, I imagine, time and again with other dancers. Are those the people that you predominantly work with, dancers, or do you work with other people in other aspects of performing arts?
So my predominant group that I do work with is dancers. However, I also work with musical theatre performers quite a bit, so that crosses into the dance space. And when I'm working on musicals or with musical theatre performers, you start working with really the whole company. So you've got the orchestra that you're looking after, you've got your stage crew, you've got wigs and makeup, you've got all these different people who are part of putting production together. So they're my dancers is what creates the bulk of my caseload. However, I do go into other areas of performing arts as well.
So with, say, besides the dancers, that will come back to them certainly, what might be some of the presenting issues you face from, say, the production crew or, the production team as distinct from the performing artists? Because I think they're often neglected and yet they're coming to you.
Yeah, and even in like how you say they're neglected, in some cases, when you go and you work on a show, there's some shows that I've worked on where physio services are only available to the performers. It's not always available to the whole company. And then you get other shows. Say, for example, I worked on Matilda while they were in Perth a couple of years ago. And during that, the whole company has access to physiotherapy. So it's really good to see that inclusion, knowing that it takes a whole team to get a show up onto the stage. So the kind of profile of pain is quite different between a performer and between someone who works backstage. And it really depends on the show and on the loads associated with that show. However, when you look at what the technical team need to do, for example, if they've come out of a bump in or a bump out, these guys have been working like 18-hour days, lifting heavy loads, pushing things around, having a really tight schedule that they need to work around, which has the various stresses that are associated with that. And so you can see some of these sort of overload type presentations or load management type presentations where they've had a sudden spike in their activity that they're doing. There's also things to do with like weirdly shaped props and weird positions that they go into. Or if we look at wig staff, for example, people who prepare all wigs, they spend a lot of time essentially doing long hours of hairdressing. which comes with its own kind of issues, such as neck issues, shoulder issues. So it's quite different to when we work with the performers.
So looking back, say, to dancers, the ones performing, what would be some of the typical concerns, maybe injuries that they might present with? What would be the situation in which they present to you?
So specifically when we look at dancers, and I'm going to draw probably predominantly on the ballet population here, because it's most of what I see, and it's also probably what's best represented within the literature base at the moment. So when we look at ballet dancers, most injuries or most pain profiles are to do with overuse or overload issues rather than acute traumatic events. So what we tend to see is probably about 80 to 90% of all presentations has some kind of overuse component to it. Then when we look at sort of location on the body, over half of the injuries that we see, or half of the pain that we see, is below the knee. So these are predominantly foot and ankle issues, lower leg issues that we're seeing with the dancers there. So I spend a lot of time playing with people's feet.
A question related to that would be, are there occasions when you think, I wish you had come to me sooner? And maybe there are good reasons why they didn't come to you sooner, but perhaps you might just say a bit about how you would often see performing artists, and are there times when perhaps they should be aware of warning signs that they should be presenting to you sooner?
So historically, yes, I used to feel like I wanted to see my performers sooner. However, within the private practice that I work in, and also when I work with companies, I've worked really hard to develop a culture around removing the stigma from having an injury and coming and presenting early and coming and being really open in communication around that. So currently I feel like I actually see most artists that I work with when I'd like to. I don't feel like I'm having to wait, but I think that's reflective of doing a lot of hard work in that area and developing relationships with dance schools and performing arts institutes such as the WA Academy of Performing Arts, where, for example, it's orientation week there at the moment, and myself and the other physiotherapists at our practice, we go and we talk to the first years and we talk about what they should do when they are experiencing pain and when they should come and see us. And then throughout the semester, we keep a really open communication with the performer's consent with their team of teachers, so that it's continuing that kind of team-based approach, which we found has actually really helped in getting performers seen in a timely manner.
Team approach sounds like it's becoming more critical, more crucial in holistic care of all parts of the artist's life, but also the part of the production life. Would that be right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we look at pain and musculoskeletal pain, it has such a wide biopsychosocial platform that it's launched from. And so when we're working with the artist, we need to think about, there will be some biomedical things that are involved and physiological functions that are involved, but there's also the psychological side. There's also the social context in which they're performing, and that brings the team of teachers into it. It also needs to consider the team that we're working in as health professionals. So as a healthcare provider, I work really closely with sports physicians. I work closely with sports psychologists and performance psychologists, sports dietitians, so that we're providing a really holistic care. And we're also working in a goals-based approach with our patients. So, and those goals are centered around their personal goals, but also the goals that we're working on as physiotherapists and healthcare providers. And it's bringing in everyone in their team so that artist is at the centre of a whole group of people.
So as a second last question for this time that we've got together, I guess I'm interested to know, are there particular traps that you might see performers falling into with regard to their health and well-being that perhaps you might offer some better ways of approaching it, or a strategy, or just a way of thinking about their overall well-being?
Yeah, there's quite a few traps that I see performers fall into. I think the first trap is that a lot of performers see an injury or see any pain that they experience as a big red stop sign. And I think we need to change that dialogue around that to it more being a speed bump and being something that might slow them down for a short period of time, but it's something that they can actually learn from and develop from. And we see this particularly in younger artists. If they're approaching their first injury, they actually learn so much about it. So it's kind of changing it from a stop sign to a speed bump in how we approach it. I think the other kind of trap that I see performers fall into is this idea of more is better all the time. So this idea that they need to be doing more training, that they're an artist 24/7, when really they're a person as well. And they need to have some really good balance in their life and have fun, as opposed to being so set on that end goal by doing too much, but instead taking incremental steps to allow them to achieve that.
That's terrific. I guess then finally, are there things you would like to encourage anyone who would contemplate seeing a physio? What might be the things that would help them have the best communication with the physio? And perhaps you've got some perceptions around physios who have experience with performing arts as distinct from those who may not have experience with working with performing arts. Any thoughts around those two ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of advice in coming to see the physio, I think come in with an open mind would be the first idea that I get there, and come in with the idea of this person isn't going to fix me. They're going to provide me with the management skills and management tools so that I can take control of my own pathway, as opposed to providing a quick fix, which within the current literature just doesn't sit well. In terms of seeing someone who comes from a background in performing arts, I suppose being a performer, we know that culture, and we know the ins and outs of it. We know the struggles within it. We also know the real highs of it, and we respect that. And we respect that the identity of a performer is so kind of entrenched within the performing arts that they're involved in. And so by seeing someone who understands that and understands the physicality and the loads around that the performing arts, you're going to get a sense of care which takes you to another level in some way and strengthens you as a performer. And that's not to say that someone who's got no background in performing arts is any lesser, because a lot of people are really willing to learn and to engage more in that area, because as healthcare professionals, we are constantly striving to do the best for our patients.
Great. Oh, that's terrific, Danica. Thanks so much for your time today to participate in this interview.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for having me and for letting me share a bit of my experiences.
Oh, delighted, Danica. And for all of you who've watched this or any of the others in the series, I encourage you to log on to the website that is for ASPAH, the Australian Society for Performing Arts Healthcare, where you can find this and other videos about health professionals working with those who work in all areas of the performing arts. So watch out for our next video and for the links that would allow you to become a member and support the work of the Australian Society for Performing Arts Healthcare. This video was produced for ASPAH with the support of Sense Connection. Bye.